Good morning, boys and girls. This is Engage New York 6th grade, Module 3, Lesson 6. So we're going to be learning about rational numbers on the number line today. The opening exercise, both A and B, are a review of skills that you should already know how to do. So push pause. Go ahead and answer all 3 questions on A, all 3 questions on B. Unpause when you have that finished. Converting a fraction to a decimal is a skill that you should already know how to do. There are a couple different ways that you can go about it. The one that always works, if you take so you have a numerator and the denominator of a fraction, divide the numerator by the denominator, and unless it's an improper fraction, you'll have 0 whole numbers, so you'll have to add a decimal point and annex zeros. And this works for every single fraction. To change a fraction to a decimal, divide the numerator by the denominator and annex zeros. 1/2 is equal to 5/10. 4/5 is equal to 0 and 8/10. 6 and 7/10. 6 is a whole number. We know the decimal point's job is to separate whole numbers from parts. So 6 is going to go on the side of the whole numbers. And 7/10, you put a 7 in the tenths place. Okay, changing a decimal to a fraction, a decimal number to a fraction, whatever your number is, becomes your numerator. And then the place value of the last digit is your denominator. So this is tenths and hundredths, so 42 hundredths. Okay, we have 3 and 75 hundredths. 3 is our whole number. So then our parts become our numerator. The 5 is in the hundredths place. So 3 and 75 hundredths. Lastly, we have 36 and 90 hundredths. So 36 is our whole number. Our parts is our numerator. And the 0 is in the hundredths place. Now, each of these can be reduced. And that's a skill that you should also already know how to do. If you turn to the next page, it gives us a rather long and lengthy definition of a unit fraction. I'm going to read it to you. Follow along. If b is a non-zero whole number, then the unit fraction 1/b is located on the number line by dividing the segment between 0 and 1 into b segments of equal length. One of the b segments has 0 as its left endpoint. The right endpoint of the segment corresponds to the unit fraction 1/b. That seems very difficult to understand, so I'm going to work with you to break that down. We can get a clear meaning of what a unit fraction is. For all unit fractions, the numerator is 1. The denominator is any whole number except 0. So that kind of takes care of the first sentence. If b, which is our denominator, is a non-zero whole number, then the unit fraction 1/b. So we need to come up with a whole number that's not 0 for our example of a unit fraction. So let's choose 3. Let's say b equals 3, so our unit fraction is going to be 1/3, for example. So it doesn't have to be 3, it can be any whole number except 0. So we're going to keep reading. It says, then unit fraction 1/b, so 1/3, is located on the number line by dividing the segment between 0 and 1. So if this is a number line, it goes on forever. So here's 0 and here's 1 whole. It says we have to divide this segment into b segments of equal length. Well, b equals 3, so I need to divide this into 3 equal parts. And that's pretty close. There's only 2 lines, but that's not what we're worried about. We're worried about equal parts. So we have 1, 2, 3 equal parts. So I'm going to start back at the top. If b, so the denominator, is a non-zero whole number, then our unit fraction, 1/b, in this case 1/3, is located on the number line by dividing the segment between 0 and 1 into B segments of equal length. Okay? One of the three segments has 0 as its left endpoint, and the right endpoint is the unit fraction. 1 over B, 1/3. Well, we can label this. We know if we're at 0, we haven't crossed any of the three parts. When we get to here, we've crossed one of the three parts. Now, we've crossed 2 of the three parts. Now, we've crossed 3 of the three parts. And 3/3 is equal to 1 whole. So 1/3 is our unit fraction. That means no matter that the numerator is always 1, and it's going to be our first mark after 0 if we divide it into that many parts. Let's determine what is the scale of this number line. What is the value of each space? What are we counting by? So here is 1/3, and then to get from 1/3 to 2/3, you have to go another 1/3. So the scale of this number line is 1/3. So by identifying the unit fraction, we can identify the scale and what we need to be counting by. We're going to use that information to graph 3/10 and its opposite on the number line. What is the opposite of 3/10? It is negative 3/10. Okay, so we know that we have to divide the part between 0 and 1 into B number of segments. So B is our denominator. Our denominator here is 10. So I'm going to take the area between 0 and 1 and break it into 10 equal parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now, the scale has to be the same throughout the number line. So I need to take the space between -1 and 0 and break it into 10 equal parts. Parts are not very equal today, but we're going to do the best that we can. So now, I need to think about what my unit fraction would be. So if there are 10 parts between 0 and 1, so that's my denominator, 10 is a whole number, it's not 0. My numerator needs to be 1. So the segment that has 0 on the left has 1/10 on the right. Now each time I'll just add 1/10. So here's 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10, 6/10. And 10/10 is equal to 1 whole. Now I can find the opposite of each of these. So 1 unit to the right is 1/10. 1 unit to the left is -1/10. -2/10. -3/10. Now that we've identified our unit fraction, we know the scale and we can plot fractions on a number line. Okay, exercise 1 says use what you know about the point -7/4 and its opposite to graph both points on the number line below. The fraction -7/4 is located between which two consecutive integers? So now it brought back a vocabulary word from a previous lesson. Integers are whole numbers. They can be positive or negative. So positive or negative whole number. So go ahead, let's see if we can find -7/4 and its opposite. So what is the opposite of -7/4? 7/4. Okay, so my denominator tells how many equal parts between 0 and 1. So I need 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So, our what is our scale for this? It has to be 4 equal parts between 0 and 1, so that's my denominator. And the numerator has to be 1, so my scale would be 1/4. Find the segment that has 0 on the left, 1/4 is on the right. 2/4, 3/4, 4/4 is equal to 1. I need to get to 7/4. So I'm going to have to continue my scale. So the distance between 1 and 2, my scale has to be consistent. So this would be 5/4, 6/4, 7/4, 8/4. Okay, so keeping the scale consistent, I need to move to the negative side of the number line. The scale is 1/4, so I need 4 equal parts. Okay, so I need to plot the point -7/4, 7/4. Okay, so let's see if we follow the direction. Graph both points on the number line below. We've done that. Then it says the fraction -7/4 is between what two consecutive integers? So we're looking for whole numbers that -7/4 is between. Well, it's between -6/4 and -8/4, but those aren't whole numbers. So we can see that -1 and -2 are on either side. So I want you to think about, is -7/4 greater than or less than -2? Is it greater than or less than -1? Then we've got 7/4. It's between these two integers. So think about, is 7/4 greater than or less than 1? Greater than or less than 2? All number lines go from least to greatest. So -7/4 is greater than -2, but less than -1. Where 7/4 is the opposite. It's greater than 1, but less than 2. So keep that in mind. Keep our order from least to greatest in mind when you're talking about the value of these numbers. Okay, on the back, we're talking about rational numbers. So that's a vocabulary word new to this lesson. We need to define it. Rational numbers are whole numbers, fractions, decimals, and they can be positive or negative. So all whole numbers, fractions, and decimals, they can be positive or negative, are rational numbers. So all integers are also rational numbers, but all rational numbers are not integers. Fractions and decimals are not integers. So all whole numbers, fractions, and decimals are rational numbers. They can be positive or negative. So looking at example number 2, the water level of a lake rose 1 2/25 feet after it rained. A says write a rational number to represent the situation. So you can write a whole number, a fraction, or a decimal that would represent the water of a lake rising after it rained. So the rational number for that would be 1 2/25. B says, what two integers is 1 2/25 between on a number line? So if I were going to put 1 2/25 on the number line, it would go between which of the integers? And we've got the integers listed on there. So 1 is a whole number, so we know this is greater than 1, but the parts are not enough to make 2 wholes. So 1 2/25 is greater than 1, but less than 2. So it would be between 1 and 2 on the number line. C says write the length of each segment on the number line as a decimal and a fraction. So now we have a vertical number line. Let's look at the space between 0 and 1. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 parts. So I know for scale.